Marvel's Spider-Man 2 was amazing, gruesome, and extremely frustrating. Let's talk about it. If you don't want the story spoiled or just don't want to hear my rendition of the story, skip the time on the screen. But I also can't promise spoilers when I cover other categories after the summary, so enter at your own risk. Enjoy. Following the events of the previous two games, Miles and Pete return back to some sort of normalcy by way of school. For Miles, a student in Brooklyn Visions Academy for Gifted Children, aka Super Brilliant Kids, and Pete finding a job at that same school as a new teacher. Quickly halted by the resurgence of a familiar villain face to the Spider-Man franchise but new face to these games, Sandman aka Flint Marko, who has been dormant living a normal life, is now tearing his way through New York, which prompts both Spider-Man to bolt from school and chase him down. Working together, they're able to put him into custody, only to be warned by Flint that the same people that caused him to snap are coming for them. But not before the school's principal can light into Pete and fire him for abandoning the students during Sandman's attack. This leads Pete back to Aunt May's house, which he now owns since May's passing, and he meets up with MJ. Unknown to them, though, longtime friend Harry surprises them, amazingly recovering from an extreme illness. MJ has to bolt, which leaves Pete and Harry to go down memory lane, exploring fond memories, and for a grand finale to the friendship tour, Harry has put together a startup company which goes by the name of the Emily May Foundation, and offers Pete a job to be able to fulfill their childhood goal of healing the world. Tempted with the offer and thinking about hanging up the suit for good for Miles to take over the #1 Spider-Man spot, they're immediately put up against what will be the toughest challenge of their lives. It all starts out with a wrapped inmate transfer of Scorpion and Martin Lee, led by Kraven the Hunter, who kicks off a domino effect of non-stop bullshit for our Spider duo. This prompts the appearance of hunters who have been cloaked following the convoy the entire time, and they have been setting up everywhere around the city in hunter blinds and bases using the same tech. Kraven's purpose for attacking the convoy is simple: snatch up, imprison, and study Scorpion and Lee for him to hunt. The hunters overpower the Spider-Man and Raph guards due to numbers, tech, and strategy, which leads them to taking the two supervillains, splitting up Miles and Peter. That leads Miles to focus on Lee rather than helping save people in danger once out of the ship, but he comes to his senses, letting the hunters get away with the baddies, and uses his beefed up bioelectricity to handle the situation in a rather anger-filled way. With Kraven now introduced to our heroes, Pete does some digging and finds that he's been hunting supervillains for sport, hence Sandman's tantrum across the city and the kidnapping of Lee and Scorpion, which isn't the first instance, however. As Vulture, Shocker, Electro were already hunted and killed, Scorpion soon follows suit as he's outmatched by Kraven. Let's time out here, guys. This game pulls a Spider-Man No Way Home, and it really makes you connect and care about the bad guys. Well, not Kraven, he can go fuck himself, but these are our villains. Like, we deal with them. You don't fucking touch them, buddy. Okay, time back in. With the next target being Black Cat, who's currently using some Doctor Strange magic to escape from the hunters and go to Paris with Miles' help, she opens the door, or portal in this case, for the magic element that Marvel likes to play around with. With downtime, it's Coney Island time as Peter, MJ, and Harry reconnect, and Miles runs into Mysterio in his new reformed life, creating Mysteriums around New York to ultimately just fuck with people's heads because they end up failing big time. So as Miles dips from Coney, our trio have a good time until running into Tombstone, who is also reforming his life. But with supervillain presence nearby means an attack from the hunters is imminent. Protecting Tombstone from the hunters the best he can, Pete ends up stuck between a rock and a hard place, almost losing innocent lives while being crushed. Harry intervenes and using his new powers to help, but unfortunately for them, Tombstone is captured. Together, Harry and Pete must join forces to rescue him while learning a few things about his new suit in the process. Meanwhile, MJ tracks down Dr. Connors, who is Harry's main doctor, aka the Lizard, a once upon a time Spider-Man villain who's tamed his reptilian alter ego, but was also grabbed up by the hunters in hopes of getting him to turn again for Kraven to hunt. In the process of the rescue mission, Connors escapes as a beginning stage lizard, and Pete gets stabbed by Kraven, almost killing him, causing Harry to go into a frenzy, beating down Kraven for hurting his friend. And as Pete lay practically dead, Harry starts to mourn. The suit begins to transfer onto Peter, reviving him and turning him into a symbiote-powered Spider-Man who gets the Kraven for the first encounter between the two, showcasing the changed Peter, who begins to only focus on hunting Kraven. Once beaten down enough, the trio rush off to scrap together an antidote for Connors, who's been let loose on New York. As time ticks away, Peter slowly losing control of Peter as the symbiote takes the lead. Turning him into an asshole, he takes off to track down Connors, which he does, ripping through New York to cure him though. Connors tries to get Peter to turn over the suit, but fails due to the hold it has on Peter. Returning home with only one goal in mind, and that is to sleep while completely shrugging off MJ. With hunters tracking him down, he bolts, leaving MJ to fend off the hunters by herself, and now she must chase down Pete, who at this point is no longer Peter. Seriously, this part just becomes a nightmare for MJ, who's tracking him through a tunnel, getting chased down, and during this whole process, Miles ends up getting snatched up by Kraven in hopes of using him to lure Pete. Finding himself locked away in Kraven's villain dungeon, Miles crosses paths with Martin Lee, in a Roman Colosseum-type battle scenario. Beating him, Miles chooses to spare Lee because we're Spider-Man, of course, and sends him off to find Peter, which he does. trying to explain his new view on life and that he's changed, Peter just shrugs him off, just like he did with MJ, and swings off to help Miles for his final encounter with Kraven, and then eventually turns into Miles fighting Peter. After beating him, Miles is able to pull Pete from the suit and set him free from being an asshole. Attempting to bring the symbiote to Dr. Connors to stash it away, a sickly and worsening by the minute Harry intercepts and takes the symbiote for himself, turning himself into Venom, and going on a rampage through the Oscorp building, killing everyone in his path. Tracked down by Kraven for his greatest and final hunt, they confront one another for yet another disaster in Times Square, as this becomes one brutal scene I didn't expect to watch in a Spider-Man game. Venom grabs a hold of Kraven, only to bite off his head. Yeah, fucking brutal. From here on out, the mission is to stop Venom from healing the world. In doing so, Miles is able to help transfer Martin Lee's powers into Pete, as he's still harboring some of the symbiote. To fully rid it from his body, Miles and Martin Lee go deep into Peter's mind and set Peter free with a good guy's version of the Venom powers. Now ready to combat Venom, who has turned New York into a symbiote hell, transforming everyone into symbiotes. Oh, yeah, he even turns MJ into one, aka Scream, but you know what? Even though a horrendous situation, Pete learned how MJ really feels about him. A good couples therapy session in the books. Our trio then come up with a plan to heal the world for real. Pete starts off, but Miles ends up in the driver's seat when it comes to combating with Venom. Multiple times, who just ends up becoming the Thing from Jeepers Creepers or something out of Van Helsing at this point. The meteorite that the symbiote originally came from, who wants it back very badly. The plan is to destroy it using the particle accelerator from the Emily May Foundation. Able to do so and ridding the symbiote from Harry, he's practically dead until Miles uses his electricity to revive him. Unfortunately, in order to stay alive, he has to be put into a coma, angering Norman, setting up either DLC or Spider-Man 3, which this game does so well because it sets up multiple storylines through in-game side quests and of course the main story and credits like any good Marvel production does. So with the story summed up, let's cover why I made the title the way it is. Let's cover the amazing, the gruesome, the frustrating, and everything in between for Marvel's Spider-Man 2. For starters, let's get the bad out of the way right off the bat. When I looked at the reviews, every bad or negative review was pushing towards an absolutely horrible launch as the game was riddled with bugs and glitches. Now, this won't be a negative on my end since I played through the entire game the day it came out and experienced nothing game-breaking, nor did I ever experience a bug that would frustrate me. One time though, I did play through a bug that didn't allow me to press triangle on a door to progress through the mission, but I literally was just like, damn, let me restart the checkpoint, I'm not going to get pushed very far back, so I did. Spawned right at the door, and was able to move forward. Problem solved right there and then, and ready to play. So I'm sorry for those that did experience these bugs because it caused you to miss out on a good-ass game if you just dropped the game entirely after experiencing these bugs. Now on to my negatives for the game. Visually, I thought the game right out the gate looked a little too cartoony. Very bright. I don't know how to say it. To start off, there was just a lot of brights. Lots of oranges and yellows. The UI and HUD seemed to dial up to a 10. And the amount of hints and tutorials that never seemed to stop popping up, it was excessive. Towards the second quarter of the game, I either got used to all the color palettes and bullshit, or the game just killed off the excessiveness as the game obviously begins to get darker and darker as you go through to accommodate for the element of dread caused by Kraven and the horror vibe from Venom and Symbiote Pete. But overall, the game still looked pretty damn good. As for the story, I have nothing really to critique here other than the forced Norman Osborn emotions. I get the upset, I get the frustration about trying to figure out something to fix your kid, but the whole asking for help when it comes to Harry, fully knowing what he's become and that the odds aren't all in his favor, to then getting pissed off at us to see that we saved him, pulled out of the suit and revived enough to be put into a coma, fucking buddy. We could have left him for dead. You could have no chance at all to see your damn son again, but we gave you one. Just when we thought you were turning a new leaf like everyone else has done in this game. I guess fucking not, you piece of shit. Alright, but literally that's all I have to complain about the story-wise. It just pissed me off. But as for everything else, I really did love it. I enjoyed the fuck out of it. Simply due to the fact of expanding into the rest of the Spider-Man universe and making a good put-together story for all the new characters added and the previous ones they brought back in. It just butters my bread when stories and universes connect so well. I love characters, I love the villains and heroes. I love just a continuation to the universe. Like how Genki gets a bigger role with Pete, helping the two out when it comes to tracking and tech-related scenarios, or how Black Cat warps around New York with an item out of Doctor Strange's world. An actual introduction would be nice to him being in the next Spider-Man, or DLCs would be dope. But just the little nod that we do get that he's somewhere in this universe is really cool. As for the bromance between Harry and Pete, running around their old high school, being able to experience the Emily May Foundation, and being superheroes for a little bit before everything went to shit, that is, as well as the trio we get when MJ's around, I feel that it portrays the whole situation very well and never leaves you confused or uncaring about the relationship between the three. It paces the love they all have for each other without making someone like me, whose first experience with them being around each other is this game. So it leaves me feeling not left out of the feels when the emotional moments come around. Now, nowhere was it even close to making me cry like losing Aunt May or watching Finn sacrifice herself, so I wouldn't put this above those, but it pulled its weight in being equally as good in its own way. This story pushes more towards the tension and animosity everyone feels towards each other but never talk about. Now, obviously, most of that is all the symbiote doing the talking, so it's not actually the case because we're humans and having greater emotions than just being an asshole is what we do. But it does lead to internal struggles between our good guys many, many times. When it comes to the previous characters being brought back, I enjoyed the premise of most of the baddies we fought before already being put into play by Kraven long before we even find out. It backs up the idea of caring about the now reformed villains that we do end up rescuing and pushing out of harm's way from Kraven, since we come to find out what would have happened if we didn't. Although Scorpion probably was one either way who wouldn't have taken to our kindness very well, it still pained me to watch him try to put up a fight against Kraven, but fall victim to him so easily. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see how the others fared in battle against Kraven, but since we know the outcome, I guess the mystery can stay a mystery. Speaking of our reformed villains, Mysterio and his whole Mysterium fiasco is a little nice touch for some side content. Tombstone makes a nice but also believable appearance, believable in the sense of still being a mechanic in his later years, but also gives the hunters a reason to attack Coney Island while our trio was out trying to have a good time. And this whole showdown allows for Harry to be put into a situation to showcase himself to Pete and MJ that he has powers himself. Then for the elephant in the room, Martin Lee. Starting out the game, still a bad guy, but I believe only for himself, doing what he has to do in the next coming hours to survive against Kraven, until his encounter with Miles, who pushes him to see a different view. Then eventually putting his power into Pete, and with Miles' help, relieving Pete of the guilt he has been carrying around, which was allowing what was left of the symbiote attached to him to keep control. For the actual villains of the story, Lizard doesn't get a whole hell of a lot of time before being beat down by Peter and cured to bring back Dr. Connors. But everything about a giant-ass lizard that doesn't stop growing and is out for blood is definitely fucking notable. Kraven brings everything to the table that you could want from a main villain: super strength, resilience in the sense that he's never going to stop coming after you and has what it takes to plow through everything in his way, an actual force behind him, not just breaking out prisoners to run amok while he does his business. He's got the upper hand with numbers, tactics, and technology amongst him and his hunters, proving to be the real deal by disposing of villains who have once combated Spider-Man like it was nothing. Then we've got the whole symbiote and Venom, just straight up dark, scary power. A sense of dread and horror. Lizard would be the closest to Venom, I would guess, because there's not just some guy in a suit. These are actual monsters that would just send fucking chills down your spine having to deal with. The way Venom brings to life an army of symbiotes and smothers the city and as well, whatever all this shit is, puts him probably above Kraven for a powerhouse of a villain. Obviously, you'd have to put him above Kraven because he just straight up bites his head off. Visually, Venom is just fucking crazy looking, and it's fucking good in a terrifying way. Like, goddamn. On to the gruesome. Since we're talking about the story and Venom being Venom, might as well cover another topic that involves it. The first game's definitely dabbled in dark, especially the first one with people dying from a plague, suicide bombings, and Pete's beatdown, but I don't know if I was fully ready for the darkness that Venom brought. Like, damn. The game's sounds and music scores just hit hard. Now, I never really jumped anything as I kind of predicted the scary parts, but it still dug deep into the creepiness aspects. But nothing came close to what I just mentioned. The chomping off of Kraven's head by Venom and the rampage of killing all of Oscorp's guards. I never expected to play as Venom, so I was like, what the fuck? I'm so sorry. And then nom. Add on Pete, MJ, and 70% of New York being turned into grotesque symbiotes like it's a zombie apocalypse, you got a good damn vibe going for the whole dark and scary setting. Speaking of playing, I'll jump into the frustrating part really quick. I played on the hardest difficulty the game has to offer when you start out, thinking it was just going to be like the previous two Spider-Mans. Not at all. Like, I didn't play the previous ones on the hardest difficulties because I thought I'd get fucked by the combo-based combat, but since replaying and covering the first two games, I thought I'd be fine since the boss fights weren't really anything special. They were fine, but they needed 2-on-1s to make them worthy of satisfaction for beating them. In 2's case, however, every boss, unlike the first one, now has multiple phases and a quick and powerful attack setting on the hardest modes like you're playing a damn Souls-like. The only difference is that you get a checkpoint at each phase, so obviously not a Souls-like. But holy shit, I don't play those for a good reason, and I apologize for making the comparison to the Souls-like genre just because I found it hard. But goddamn, there were points where I needed to step back and take a breath because I was getting cheesed upon by a giant fucking lizard. Just when I thought I'd be done fighting, I get thrown into another phase of the fight, and I just found myself pausing the game and walking out of my room to grab another drink. I'm gonna get cheat for comparing the two even remotely, I know, oops, but I was gonna throw something. I was getting pissed. Okay, so now it's time for some more amazing and everything in between. I was excited for Spider-Man 2 simply for the fact of how good the first two games were. Now for me recently, this has proved to be a red flag because of how these newer games just haven't lived up to expectations. Like, I went all in, ended up pre-ordering for a hefty price, unlike I did for Payday 3, and I'm glad I made those two bets. Payday 3 was worth that regular $40 price tag, while Spider-Man 2 was worth a pre-order price if you did end up pre-ordering it. Now, you only get some cool suits and a few pay-to-win extra skill points, but I really didn't complain because I loved my time in the game. So as far as the price goes, I was happy with the product I paid for. Now as for content padding and gameplay, the previous full game had DLCs, which I expect we'll see considering the setups at the end of the game, as well as the last minute details during side storylines, but overall it seemed to have broke even when it came to open world content. Nothing really notable. You've got your hideouts, bases to conquer, got your photos and friendly neighborhood Spider-Man app quests to solve. Each of the districts have certain amount of, open world activities to gather up and finish in order to see a few trophies and the platinum finally, as well as the tokens to upgrade gadgets and skills. Those activities, however, are basically just reskinned to fit the new game's way of doing things, so like I said, it broke even with content. Although gameplay-wise, I did love the new addition of the web wings and the web lines you can now place during stealth. I've created interconnecting webs and strung up the entire hideouts like a true spider would do to its prey. And as for the web wings, it's a great addition to traveling. Putting wind tunnels around the world for added speed and gusts from chimneys and other buildings to push you up for continuous movement, especially since 2 opens up New York, adding more map to cover, meaning you'll be able to travel over open waters and the ability to explore parts of Queens and Brooklyn. Now, I mentioned before when I talked about frustration, but even though I did get pissed a bunch, boss fights have been undeniably revamped for the better. So if I didn't play it through on the hardest difficulty, they received nothing but praise. Also, the ability to parry was a nice add to the combat mechanism, although I'm not going to lie, timing isn't my strong suit at all, so getting my face dragged along the floor by the bosses every time missing a parry was definitely the reason for my abundance of curse words throughout. But don't let me take away from the combat actually being beefed up and more fulfilling just because I got angry. Then we have the new symbiote powers from Pete to go along with Miles' Venom electricity. Each of our Spider-Men now have juiced up powers, so we're not just using Spider-Man combat and gadgets. Speaking of both Spider-Men, the game is built around being able to play as both Miles and Pete, each having their own character swap setting like GTA 5 did. So anytime you wanted to switch outside of the story mission, you could. But even in story missions, the developers made it a common thing to have you never playing as one or the other for an extended amount of time, allowing lots of playing time for both Spideys, and if you're out and about in the world, you may even run into your fellow Spider in combat or joining you in combat if they just so happen to swing on by. As for the trophy run, well, it's got the same template as the others. Finishing the story, nothing difficulty related, unlocking every ability and suit, upgrading your gadgets and skills to the fullest, reaching level 60, 100%ing all the districts, which basically unlocks every other trophy on the list, since each of the activities and side quests that can be done in order to 100% have their own trophies as well. So by the time you've beaten the game, you want to be exactly right around the corner, but if you've been doing anything on the side while playing, you might as well just go for the plat. Overall, I just felt this game was worthy of the title with the word amazing in it, so I'm going to give Marvel Spider-Man 2 a 9.4. Nothing's perfect in this world, but Marvel Spider-Man 2 for sure was pretty damn close. The points I dropped were due to my experience with the game, so again, I feel bad if you had game-breaking glitches or bugs that made you stop playing. If I ever experienced any of those, it would have reflected in my score, but since I didn't, they don't ruin anything for my score. For the ones who didn't experience anything, you'll have a 9.4 waiting for you at the end of the game. With my final inputs on the game, I'll leave off with an empty your wallet rating. It's worth the damn money. As for the platinum, it's somehow even easier than the previous 2 games, so it only adds to my shiner up rating. It's not an embarrassingly easy platinum either that you're ashamed of having. It's a must-have, and if you didn't get it, then I'd be ashamed because literally everybody in the world can walk away with this shined up in their trophy collection and feel good about it. Was Marvel Spider-Man 2 worth it? Yes.